G'day folks, how you going? Today we're going to have a look at the CB radio, how it works and how to install one, and we'll do some legal bits as well, and we'll try not to get too technical. Now I've heard and read a lot of things about people and their ideas on using a CB radio, and if you need one when towing. They're a great safety tool while on the road, and everybody should seriously consider installing one in their car. Now don't panic if you've got one. You can get a lot of great road information just by listening and not even having to talk on it. But if you need to talk, there are some things you really need to know. Now some channels have an allocated purpose and can only be used in a particular way, but I'll get back to that later. First, we need to understand just a little bit about what makes a radio tick and how to get the best from it and not cause problems for other users. So stay with me and I'll try and tie it all together and it will all make sense in the end. You're sitting in your car listening to the radio and you may have it tuned to 94.7, but you're getting a bit sick of that, so you change it to 108 and listen to another radio station. Those numbers are the frequency that the radio station are transmitting on. Now you can program those different stations into a different preset number on your radio. Call it preset or call it channel, same thing. So you program your radio one way and somebody else programs theirs a different way, and so on. Just like channel 1 on a police radio is different to channel 1 on a fire truck or channel 1 on a CB radio. It's the frequency that determines what you're transmitting on. Everybody calls these radios a two-way radio. Well, that's not actually the case. In fact, a real two-way radio didn't exist until a mobile phone came along. A two-way radio listens and talks at the same time. Two-way, just like a phone. A communications radio may listen and talk, but it can only do it one at a time, not together. When you push the button on the mic, your radio talks on one frequency, and then when you let go, it listens on another. You may have heard that a radio transmits over line and sight, but what does that actually mean? Two cars on a highway talk on a radio. If there are no hills or buildings, they could get up to 10 kilometres distance between the two, and under really good conditions they may even get more. And this is called simplex. But put a building or some hills in between, that could come down to as low as 1 kilometre. How can we fix this? We can put a person to sit on top of a building or a hill to listen to everything we say and repeat everything we say, but that's not really going to work too well. Or we could put a radio up there that could do the job automatically. This is called a repeater. It listens on frequency 1 and almost at the same time retransmits what you're saying on frequency 2. With this you can get over 100 kilometres radio range, but that's only if you're in an area where there is a repeater located. And to know if you can access a repeater, all you have to do is push the mic button in for about a second and let go. Most of the time you'll hear a ch sort of sound, and that's the repeater tail. If you can hear that, then you can access a repeater. When you buy a new radio, they usually come with a list of what channels are what and what their purpose are. There are two types of UHF radios. There's the old 40 channels and the new 80 channels. The first 40 channels are the same on both. Then on the 80 channel radio it has 40 more channels. Some channels have limitations on them, so just check the list. Now the main restrictions to know are that channels 1 to 8 are the listening channels for the repeaters, and 31 to 38 are the talking channels for the repeaters. So try to avoid using channels 31 to 38 because there may not be a repeater in your area, but it is possible that your signal could hit a repeater that you can't hear. If it does, that'll disrupt that repeater so that no one else can use it. So channels 5 and 35 are the dedicated emergency channels. It's a repeater channel, so you can't use any of them at any time. A good example is, I just recently read a story in Queensland. Some people were using channel 5 and tying it up, and the emergency operator spent 40 minutes trying to tell that person that he can't use that radio and that he was a proper emergency operator and he can't use that channel to go find another channel. And they didn't believe him, and this went on for 40 minutes. When they finally did go, the radio operator then heard somebody else trying to make a call that couldn't be heard because of the other people using the channel, and turns out they were in a car accident, and they sat there for that entire time with the other person in the car watching them die because they couldn't get through to the emergency operator. So basically channel 5 and 35, stay right away from them. Channel 40 is the highway channel. Some refer to it as the truckies channel, and while they are the main users of it, anybody can use it. It's a great way of finding out the road conditions ahead of you, and yes, you also find out about those flash for cash devices. And by the way, here is where you can communicate to the truckies about them passing you or you passing them safely for everyone's sake. Channel 18 is the caravanning channel, and channel 10 is for four-wheel drivers when they're out in the bush. Now when it comes to installing your radio, that's a real hard question to answer of where to put it. The modern vehicles of today, it's just, there's no room for putting anything, so it's really hard. The one thing we got working for us these days is the radios today are a lot smaller than the radios of 20 years ago. They used to be big bulky things. Now I've got two in here, I've got one here and I've got one here. This radio here is actually a remote head, so the front of the radio is separated from the back of the radio, and the back of the radio is actually installed in behind the back of the glove box. In fact, both radios are up in behind the back of the glove box. So this has got a remote head, so I can see the front of it here, where this one here has everything on the microphone. Extremely convenient. There's no head, so there's nothing to get in your way. So they make it a lot easier to put radios in. In fact, my car over here has two radios in it as well, and I've got those radios mounted in the boot, and they've got a remote head up on the dash. So a remote head is a really good way to go. You pay a bit more for the radio, but it's worth it in the long run, in the fact that it's so much easier to install. Where to put a radio is really a thing between individual cars. The thing to remember is it's not allowed to interfere with your vision out here, and you don't want it to be in your way if you're getting in and out of the car. You don't want to be banging your knee in it or anything like that, or if you're four-wheel driving, you don't want to be bashing around four-wheel driving, smacking your head in it or something like that. So basically what I do is I sit in the car for a little while and just look around and just move it around to work out where the best spot is. That's really what works for me. But it's a trial and error for every individual person and car. When it comes to finding the right aerial for your vehicle, it can come across pretty confusing with size, mounts, dBs, gain and a heap of other variables. Different aerials do different jobs under different conditions. But first, I want to explain what the dB or gain is all about. Here's your aerial. The radio waves basically come out of your aerial like this. Some up, some out, and some down. Aerials have different gains. Some have nothing, or unity gain. Then you can get them in all types of dB gain. Don't worry about the dB, it's just the name of the measurement. The gain will boost the strength of the signal. Vehicle-mounted radios have an output when transmitting of 5 watts, give or take. So if you use an aerial that has no gain, you get 5 watts out. If your aerial has a 3 dB gain, it's the same as using a radio that has 10 watts output on a no gain aerial. If you use a 6 dB gain aerial, that's like a 20 watt radio. For every 3 dB in gain, it doubles your output. So get an aerial with a higher gain. Well, no, not exactly. There is a compromise. With an aerial that has no gain to 3 dB, then the radio wave is very wide. Great for hilly areas or in cities, etc. Not as good for open highways. With aerials that have a very high gain, the signal is a lot narrower, but travels a greater distance if there are no obstacles around. You need to think about what's going to work for you the best in the area that you'll be operating in mostly. You can get some aerials that have 2 types of gain in the one package, so you just change the top bit depending on what it is you're going to be doing. There are a number of different types of aerials that you can use. You can get ones that are attached to a mirror to the glass, and I don't particularly like them ones. I think you probably get a better job if you lick one finger and stuck the other one up the aerial socket and use that. You can get magnetic mounts, they're a little bit better, but I'd just be concerned about the strength of the magnet so that it doesn't blow up when you're driving down the road. You can get them for your roof racks, for gutters. It just depends on what kind of vehicle you have to what you can do. You notice on mine, I've got my aerials on both sides of the rhubar. You do see some people, they put an aerial right next to each other. That's not a good idea because one can interfere with the other one. That's why I've got mine separated. You'll also notice a big thing these days are these kind of aerials with this metal base here. This is called a ground independent. Depending on where you stick your aerial to how much metal is around in what direction to the kind of effect it has. Ideally you want to have a metal plate with an aerial in the middle of it. Not always possible, so this kind of solves that problem by creating an artificial ground plane, they call it, which basically makes the aerial think there's metal all the way around it. And you see that a lot on boats. When they have fiberglass boats, they put a metal plate underneath to be able to bounce that signal back up into the air. As far as recommendations go, I don't make recommendations because there's too many variables involved. But suggestions, as far as a radio, if you were to stick to some of the big name brands, you've got Oricom, GME and Unident. They're pretty good names, you won't go too far wrong with them. Icom is another good one, but they're on the more commercial stuff, so their radios are quite well designed and built, so you pay for that of course. Features, they all more or less have the same kind of features in them, but I'd be looking for one definitely that has a scan in it, because can you imagine you're out in the middle of nowhere and you've broken down, you haven't seen anybody for ages. If you can put your radio into scan mode, you can listen around. Eventually you may hear a local farmer or something talking on the radio. Now you've got a place to make contact with and hopefully find some help. So I reckon a scan is a real must. As far as aerials, basically I have the opinion of the higher the better, and the longer it is the better as well, the longer the aerial is. You can imagine if you put a little stumpy aerial on your rhubar or something like that, it's not going to work very well because it's got to try and communicate through all the metal and everything of the vehicle, so it's not going to work very well. you need to have a longer aerial on your rhubarb. If you're putting something on the roof, you can go for something a little bit shorter, keeping in mind that dB gain that we talked about earlier. For instance, on my rhubarb, you saw I've got two different size aerials. The real long one is a 9 dB gain aerial, so very good for long range, and that's hooked to my truckies channel. So talking up and down the highway, it should hopefully get me a little bit more range from that. The other one on the other side is a 4.5 dB gain, so a little bit more in the middle. And that's hooked to my other radio, so if I'm talking in hills and things, that should work okay for that. So I've kind of gone one each way, so I've got hopefully the best of both worlds. As far as the right aerial to choose for your requirements, again, that's up to you, but if you got something around about that sort of 4.5 dB, maybe 6, you would be in the middle of the road, just a little bit easy each way. So that's probably the best way to go. As I said before, personally I think unity gain or no gain at all, was to stick your finger in the aerial and use that instead. Well, I hope you didn't get too lost in all that, and hopefully you have a better understanding to get the most out of your system and to do it safely. Now, can I just say, don't get turned off by the language that you hear sometimes on the radio. There is always going to be someone that can't work out time and place when they are talking. Now, I'm not perfect myself, but at least I know when to and not to use certain words. Not everyone wants to hear that sort of thing, so just do what I do. Turn the volume down to minimum, and if you see a heavy coming up behind you, then turn the volume up, do what you've got to do, and then if necessary, turn it back down again afterwards. Well, that's it for this one. If you liked what you've seen, hit the thumbs up down the bottom down there, and consider subscribing to my channel. But until next time, happy travels. Really seriously consider installing one in their car. Now, don't panic if you get one. You don't need to use a lot of sense when talking on them. Then the 80 channel radio has a 40. Other channels to be aware of is channel 40 is the highway channel. Some refer to it as a Chucky's channel. Is the highway channel, so refer to it. When it comes to finding the right antenna for your area, I got it.